going on to the next day, how do you know who killed him?
Um, I lived on Solomon Road, and there was an area about a mile and a half away from my house that was a bridge that crossed over Rock Creek, and I would go to that area just about every day. And
Somewhat secluded, kind of. You'd have to go there for
yeah,
a reason to be there.
right,
All right.
and I would go there to, believe it or not, pray, and also just try to rest and get some peace back in my mind again, because it was just so much garbage going on, and I was really struggling on how to deal with it. And so this one particular day was after Craig Rice was kidnapped. Um, I went back there to my spot along Rock Creek, and thought I heard some cars coming. So I went and kind of hid myself. And sure enough, about 15 cars showed up, parked on either side of the bridge and on the road of Solomon Road, on both sides of the road. And out of a black four-door sedan, it might have been dark blue. It was either dark blue or black. I watched him pull this guy out from the car, and his head was covered in a black sack. And as they got him down closer off the bridge and closer to the creek, they took the black hood off of him, and I recognized that was Craig Rice. And I also recognized that there was a whole bunch of attorneys, cops, and business people, business owners there on the scene. And they,
People you recognize as part of this syndicate,
yes,
members only.
yes. And I watched them handcuff Craig to a tree. Some people say that the handcuffs were Slim's, and Slim's real name was Terry Sistrom, and he was a Gettysburg Borough cop.
Can stay in the moment of what's happening.
Okay.
We'll come back to that.
Okay. So anyhow, I watched cops put a nightstick and basically anally rape Craig Rice with this
While he's
nightstick.
cuffed to a tree with a bag
Well,
over his head.
no, the bag's off his head.
Bag's off of his head.
Yep, bag's off his head, and they beat him around a bit, and then I watched Pennsylvania State homicide detective Robert Ackerman walk up behind him and say, "This is what we are going to do to anyone else who tries to expose us," and put 2 bullets in the back of his head.
Wow. To witness that at your age is,
Yeah,
you've had to carry that around your whole life.
yeah.
I'm sorry, Don. And you know, the people are going to ask at home, why didn't she say anything? If you saw that happen and everything that the fallout, and because this was a bombshell in a small town back then, you know, why didn't she say anything? Is going to be everyone's first question.
Right. Number one, it was too daggone dangerous at that point to try to expose anybody. I saw what they did for people like that. Number two, after I went into the military, I did start talking to politicians and
Well, just at that
things like
time,
that. Right.
we're staying in the now.
Right. At that time,
Chronologically.
the only thing I could do to be a benefit to anyone was to keep my mouth shut, live
Yeah.
long enough so I could later on do something.
And you've had to bear that this whole time.
Right.
All right. Okay, so you couldn't say anything because you knew the police were dirty. There was it would be suicide to report it.
Yeah, and I didn't know who, if any, who the clean cops were at that moment.
Uh-huh.
But after the murder of Craig Rice, that's when I started finding out who the good cops were, because they were coming out of the woodwork. They knew I was a narc, and they would come to me and talk to me about the murder of Craig Rice.
So the good dudes knew you were good,
Right.
and you got a little backstory on that. But okay, so tell me about the guy they pinned it on, Greg Harner. There's a lot of stuff up online that's curious about his appeal. We'll touch on that, but tell me, why did they pin it on, or why was Greg Harner charged with involuntary man? Why was he hit with this crime?
Greg Horner's father was FBI agent, and Greg Horner's father was also a member of the Members Only Club.
Was he out of this Harrisburg, local
Yes.
Harrisburg office?
Yeah. And quite honestly, they weren't able to pin it on me like they tried to do. So Greg Horner's father, I guess, was offered a deal and for his son to be the patsy. And Greg Horner's father took the deal, and came time for, I guess, the police to go to the Horner residence to arrest Greg Horner, as well as look for evidence. The Gettysburg Times reported that the state police were on the scene for hours searching for evidence and could not find any. Then they did a research, searching again. State police still could not find any evidence. All of a sudden, Kevin Wilson of the Gettysburg Borough Police shows up to Greg Horner's house, which is out of his jurisdiction, and evidence mysteriously appears.
Are you talking about the clothes that...
Yes.
The clothes with the blood stains,
Yes.
that are blood match typed, but not DNA typed, and even then could very well be a plant.
Right.
So extremely circumstantial evidence, considering what you just shared with us, if that's true and searchable,
Right.
which we're trying to flesh out.
Right. How can multiple Pennsylvania state troopers not see evidence that's put out in the clear open?
Yeah.
They're not that poorly trained.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's a plausible plant.
Right.
So again, we're not investigative. This is your story. This is
Right.
what you know, and this is what people want to hear. So thanks for sharing. So some weird things for y'all at home. For the kidnapping, torture, and murder, again, Greg Harner was sentenced to 7 years. Did 7 years for involuntary manslaughter, which means there's a rightful reason for Craig to be murdered. That's what that says. But really the strange things about it are that it cannot be reinvestigated upon appeal without direct evidence overturning said murder, whereas there really wasn't evidence to make such conviction anyhow. Now on top of that, there's a public appeal that's a summary but has some weird, bizarre aspects to it. And it's basically... Harner's defense attorney let the police interview him 2 weeks before the trial. So blew his entire defense out the water. And during this investigation of these claims, the judges who said that it was okay are all intertwined in Adams County. So the DAs at one point were the defense attorneys or are the judges, and later they're all what in the ghetto term we refer to as selling crack to each other. So there's a lot of weird stuff going on that worth investigating, which then segues into Dawn. You have some information about that. After 7 years for involuntary manslaughter, for torture, murder, kidnap, torture, and murder, what happened to Greg Harner after he got out, did 7 years?
My understanding was that part of the deal that his father made for Greg's arrest and imprisonment for a crime he didn't commit. My understanding was that the agreement was Greg was supposed to be paid $100,000+, and then told to leave Pennsylvania and never come back.
So cash money from the syndicate off the books. Okay, and yet nobody's really heard word of him since.
Right.
All right. Okay. Stay tuned for the conclusion of the interview. In the meantime, call the FBI. Anybody can report a crime. Ask them to investigate the Craig Rice hate crime murder. Ask them to investigate the pervert cop Michael Caricato. Ask them to investigate the repeat violent firearms offender Glenn Kessler. This is your chance to prevent this from happening to your family.